A little bit of history. The story of Linux began in 1991 when Linus Torvalds, who was a computer science student at the University of Helsinki in Finland, began writing a free operating system as a hobby. It's funny to realize now that his side hobby project became actually the world's biggest open source project in history. Oh, and in case you haven't figured it out already, this free operating system was Linux. There are a lot of definitions out there on the web for open source, and some of them are somewhat confusing for the inexperienced reader. So here is a simplified explanation. What is open source? An open source project is a software project that has its source code made accessible for the public to view and edit. The source code is simply the collection of code or programs used to develop software. In the context of Linux, it refers to the programming code that built the Linux operating system. Now, since you know what open source means, it's easy to imagine what closed source is. What is closed source? A closed source project is a software project that has its source code not made accessible for the public to view and edit. Linux is the ultimate, most famous example of an open source project. On the other hand, Microsoft Windows is the most famous example of a closed source project. Some people don't know what an operating system is, but don't worry, I got you covered. Here is a simple definition of an operating system. What is an operating system? An operating system is a software program that manages a computer's resources such as memory and disk space. It also allows a computer's hardware and software to communicate with each other. Operating systems may also include other applications like text editors, file manager, graphical user interface, software manager, and etc. There are a lot of different operating systems out there. Here are few examples: Linux, Android, Mac OS, Microsoft Windows, Apple iOS, and BlackBerry. Keep in mind that this list is very short and is in no way comprehensive. There is a massive number of operating systems out there, and it is hard even to count them all. When talking about operating system, we have to mention the kernel, which is the core of any operating system. What is a kernel? A kernel is simply the core of any operating system. It is the part of the operating system that organizes access to system resources like CPU, memory, and disk. Notice that in the definition, I say the kernel is a part of the operating system, and the following figure can help you visualize the difference between a kernel and an operating system. Here we have operating system, and kernel, as you can see, is the part of an operating system. Unlike Microsoft Windows or Mac OS, Linux has a lot of different flavors. These flavors are called distributions, and they are also referred to as distros for short. What is a Linux distribution? Since Linux is open source, many people and organizations have modified the Linux kernel along with other components of the Linux operating system to develop and customize their own flavor of Linux that suits their needs. There are literally hundreds of distributions of Linux out there. You can go to this website www.distrowatch.com to check out the enormous list of Linux distros. As you can see here, we have the list of different Linux distributions, okay, and also here we have a rank between them. The good thing about distrowatch.com is that it shows you the popularity ranking of all the Linux distros in the world. You will even see that some Linux distros are designed with a specific purpose in mind. For example, Scientific Linux is a popular Linux distro among many scientists as it contains a lot of scientific applications pre-installed, which makes it the number one Linux choice among the scientific community. Here we have many useful information about different flavors of the, or different actually, Linux distributions. And for example, here we have the rank of different flavors of the different distros of the Linux. For example, now the number one is MX Linux, number two is this version, and so on. Also here you can see different information, different type of information about the Linux distributions. About the Linux today and the future, in 1991 Linux was just a little baby, but this baby grew massively and it became so popular. Today Linux powers over 90% of the world's top supercomputers. And to add to your surprise, you may have been using Linux for years without noticing. How? Well, if you ever used an Android smartphone, then you have used Linux, and that's because Android is a Linux distribution. And if you still don't believe me, go to distrowatch.com and search for Android. Let me to search it. Android. Okay, this is the one of the distributions of the Linux. As you can see here, we have the Android distribution of Linux. One or more serious matter, the majority of government servers run Linux, and that's why you will see a lot of government technical jobs requiring Linux skilled individuals. Also, big companies like Amazon, eBay, PayPal, and Walmart and many others rely on Linux to run their advanced and sophisticated applications. Furthermore, Linux dominates the cloud, as more than 75% of cloud solutions run Linux. The Linux story is truly inspiring. What was once a hobby is now literally dominating the internet, and the future even looks more promising for Linux. Famous car manufacturers and automakers like Lexus and Toyota are now adopting Linux technologies like automotive-grade Linux AGL. You can find more information on www.automotivelinux.org in this website. Okay, this is the website, and here we have many useful information related to the AGL. Okay, support for AGL and latest news, blogs, and events. Linux also runs on many embedded devices and is the backbone of the popular Raspberry Pi and BeagleBone and many other microcontrollers. You may even be surprised to know that some washing machines run on Linux. So every time you go and wash your clothes, take a moment and be thankful for having Linux in our lives.